Everyone, and today we're going to start off by looking at Sticks, who has managed to steal some parts of biscuits, which she is not allowed because chocolate biscuits are not good for kittens. Are they, Sticks? No, she's trying to steal it. Silly cat. So let's carry on. Chapter 42, Behind the Curtain. The kitchens were dark and empty when Mrs. Beamish let herself in from the courtyard. Moving on tiptoe, she peeked around corners as she went, because she knew how Cankerby the footman liked to lurk in the shadows. Slowly and carefully, Mrs. Beamish made her way towards the king's private apartments, holding the little wooden foot so tightly in her hand that its sharp claws dug into her palm. As she reached the scarlet carpeted corridor leading to Fred's rooms, she could hear laughter coming from behind the doors. Mrs. Beamish rightly guessed that Fred hadn't been told about the Ickabog attack on the outskirts of Shoeville, because she was sure he wouldn't be laughing if he had. However, someone was clearly with the king, and she wanted to see Fred alone. As she stood there, wondering what best to do, the door ahead opened. With a gasp, Mrs. Beamish dived behind a long velvet curtain and tried to stop it swaying. Spittleworth and Flapoon were laughing and joking with the king as they bade him good night. "Excellent joke, your majesty. Why, I think I've split my pantaloons," guffawed Flapoon. "We shall have to rechristen you King Fred the Funny, sire," chuckled Spittleworth. Mrs. Beamish held her breath and tried to suck in her tummy. She heard the sound of Fred's door closing. The two lords stopped laughing at once. "Blithering idiot," said Flapoon in a low voice. "I've met cleverer blobs of Curdsburg cheese," muttered Spittleworth. "Can you take a turn in entertaining him tomorrow?" grumbled Flapoon. "I'll be busy with the tax collectors until 3, said Spittleworth. But if both lords stopped talking, their footsteps also ceased. Mrs. Beamish was still holding her breath, her eyes closed, praying they hadn't noticed the bulge in the curtain. "Well, good night, Spittleworth," said Flapoon's voice. "Yes, sleep well, Flapoon." Very softly, her heart beating very fast, Mrs. Beamish let out her breath. It was all right. The two lords were going to bed, and yet she couldn't hear footsteps. Then so suddenly she had no time to draw breath into her lungs. The curtain was ripped back. Before she could cry out, Flapoon's large hand had closed over her mouth, and Spittleworth had seized her wrists. The two lords dragged Mrs. Beamish out of her hiding place and down to the nearest set of stairs, while she struggled and tried to shout. She couldn't make a sound through Flapoon's thick fingers, nor could she wriggle free. At last they pulled her into the same blue parlour where she'd once kissed her dead husband's hand. "Do not scream," said Spittleworth warned her, pulling out a short dagger he'd taken to wearing, even inside the palace, "or the king will need a new pastry chef." He gestured to Flapoon to take his hand away from Mrs. Beamish's mouth. The first thing she did was take a gasp of breath, because she felt like fainting. "You made an outsized lump in the curtain, cook," sneered Spittleworth. "Exactly what were you doing, lurking there so close to the king after the kitchens have closed?" Mrs. Beamish might have made up some silly lie, of course. She could have pretended she wanted to ask King Fred what kind of cakes he'd like her to make tomorrow, but she knew the two lords wouldn't believe her, so instead she held out the hand clutching the Ickabog foot and opened her fingers. "I know," she said quietly, "what you're up to." The two lords moved closer and peered down at her palm, and the perfect tiny replica of the huge feet the dark footers were using. Spittleworth and Flapoon looked at each other, and then at Mrs. Beamish, and all the pastry chef could think when she saw their expressions was, "Run, Bert, run." Oh my goodness. Chapter 43, Bert and the Guard. The candle on the table beside Bert burned slowly downwards while he watched the minute hand around the clock face. He told himself his mother would definitely come home soon. She'd walk in any minute, pick up his half-darn sweater, she never dropped it. One moment, children. The kitten managed to knock the guitar. The guitar has set the dogs off because they're frightened of it. Boys! Boys! I don't know what they've got against guitar music. Stop. Where were we? Yes, Meatloaf, it's a guitar. It's not frightening. Pick up his half-darn sweater as though she'd never dropped it and tell him what had happened when she saw the king. Then the minute hand seemed to speed up, when Bert would have done anything to make it slow down. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. 2 minutes left. Bert got to his feet and moved to the window. He looked up and down the dark street. There was no sign of his mother. returning. But wait! His heart leapt. He'd seen movement out of the corner. For a few shining seconds, Bert was sure he was about to see Mrs. Beamish step into a patch of moonlight, smiling as she caught sight of his anxious face at the window. And then his heart seemed to drop like a brick into his stomach. You are not having a biscuit. And now they've decided they would like a biscuit. Neither of you is having a biscuit. Goodness me, I'll be able to read in peace in a moment, children. And I haven't got a collection of... They say never work with animals. Hello, Bruno. But wait! His heart leapt. He'd seen movement on the corner. For a few shining seconds, Bert was sure she was about to see Mrs. Beamish step into the patch of moonlight, smiling as she caught sight of his anxious face at the window. And then his heart seemed to drop like a brick onto his stomach. It wasn't Mrs. Beamish who was approaching, but Major Roach, accompanied by 4 large members of the Ickabog Defence Brigade, all carrying torches. Bert leapt back from the window, snatched up the sweater from the table and sprinted through to his bedroom. He grabbed his shoes and his father's medal, forced up the bedroom window, clambered out of it, then gently slid the window closed from the outside. As he dropped down onto the vegetable patch, he heard Major Roach banging on the front door. Then a rough voice said, "I'll check the back." Bert threw himself flat in the earth behind a row of beetroots, smeared his fair hair with soil, and lay very still in the darkness. Through his closed eyelids he saw the flickering light. A soldier held his torch up high in hopes of seeing Bert running away across other people's gardens. The soldier didn't notice the earthy shape of Bert concealed behind the beetroot leaves, which threw long, swaying shadows. "Well, he hasn't got out this way," shouted the soldier. There was a crash, and Bert knew Roach had broken down the front door. He listened to the soldiers opening cupboards and wardrobes. Bert remained utterly still in the earth because torchlight was still shining through his closed eyes. Maybe he cleared out before his mother went to the palace. "Well, we've got to find him," growled the familiar voice of Major Roach. "He's the son of the Ickabog's first victim. If Bert Beamish starts telling the world the monster's alive, people will listen. Spread out and search. He can't have got far. And if you catch him," said Roach as his men's heavy footsteps sounded across Beamish's wooden floorboards, "kill him. We'll work out our stories later." Bert lay completely flat and still, listening to the men running away up and down the street, and then a cool part of Bert's brain said, "Move." He put his father's medal around his neck, pulled on the half-darn sweater, and snatched up his shoes, then began to crawl through the earth until he reached a neighbouring fence, where he tunnelled out enough dirt to let him wriggle beneath it. He kept crawling until he reached the cobbled street, but he could still hear the soldiers' voices echoing in the night as they banged on doors, demanding to search houses, asking whether they'd seen Bert Beamish, the pastry chef's son. He heard himself described as a dangerous traitor. Bert took another handful of earth and smeared it over his face. Then he got to his feet and, crouching low, darted into a dark doorway across the street. A soldier ran past, but Bert was so filthy that he was well camouflaged against the dark door, and the man noticed nothing. When the soldier had disappeared, Bert ran barefoot from doorway to doorway, carrying his shoes, hidden in the shadowy alcoves, and edging closer to the city within the city gates. However, when he drew near, he saw a guard keeping watch, and before Bert could think of a plan, he had slid behind the statue of King Richard the Righteous, because Roach and another soldier were approaching. "Have you seen Bert Beamish?" they shouted at the guard. "What, the pastry chef's son?" asked the man. Roach seized the front of the man's uniform and shook him as a terrier shakes a rabbit. "Of course, the pastry chef's son. Have you let him through these gates? Tell me." "No, I haven't," said the boy. "And what's the boy done to have you lot chasing him?" "He's a traitor," snarled Roach, "and I'll personally shoot anyone who helps him. Understand?" "Understood," said the guard. Roach released the man, and he and his companion ran off again, their torches casting swinging pools of light on the dark walls, until they were swallowed once more by the darkness. Bert watched the guard straighten his uniform and shake his head. Bert hesitated. Then, knowing it might cost his life, he crept out of his hiding place. So thoroughly had Bert camouflaged himself with all the earth that the guard didn't realise anyone was beside him, until he saw the whites of Bert's eyes in the moonlight, and he let out a yelp of terror. "Please," Bert whispered, "please don't give me away. I need to get out of here." From beneath his sweater he pulled his father's heavy silver metal, brushed earth from the surface, and showed the guard. "I'll give you this. It's real silver, if you let me out through the gates, and don't tell anyone you've seen me." "I'm not a traitor," said Bert. "I haven't betrayed anyone, I swear." The guard was an older man with a stiff grey beard. He considered the earth-covered Bert for a moment or two before saying, "Keep your medal, son." He opened the gate just wide enough for Bert to slide through. "Thank you," gasped Bert. "Stick to the roads," advised the guard, "and trust no one. Good luck." Oh, so there we go. Another 2 chapters done. Head over to Purple Mash, where you've got a fun activity for today. And we'll see you back tomorrow, hopefully with less dog and cat interruptions than today. And we'll see how we get on tomorrow.